So I'm thinking now of things in our lives that we assume are there, and they're always there in our lives, and we don't even think about these things and couldn't imagine living without these different things. And the things that occurs to me now, I was thinking before about the toilet flush and how essential that is, and how I couldn't imagine not having a toilet flush. But there was a time when we used the toilet without having a flush, and people still had to get by somehow, and that would have been awkward, and it's just difficult, and it just seems impossible. And I couldn't imagine not having a toilet flush. And but I'm thinking, but there was time we didn't have one, and then some man invented the toilet flush. I mean, I don't even know how you get the concept for something like that. And I'm wondering what else is going on in our lives now that we assume is a certain way. And then some man will find a technique for solving this thing so that we don't need to do it anymore. So I'm wondering about what's going on in the way we live our life now that we might find a solution for so we don't have to do this thing anymore. And then when we start using this fix, we'll soon not imagine or not be able to imagine not having this fix. But there was a time when we didn't have it. And another thing that occurs to me now are shoes. You know, shoes and whatever. And it occurs to me now that at some point some man thought there must be a better way of moving around and protecting our feet when we're walking. And then he invented the shoe. And then I'm thinking, that's kind of amazing, but there was a time when there was no such thing as a pair of shoes. And even the concept of a shoe would not have occurred to people. And people just assumed, well, you're walking, this is how it is. And your feet get damaged, and you have to walk carefully. And then some man realized that you could improve it in some way and invented a pair of shoes. And then I'm thinking that at some point we were wearing shoes and then we started getting blisters on our feet when we were wearing shoes. And then somehow some guy realized that we could prevent blisters from happening by using socks. And so he invented socks. And then everyone started using socks to avoid blisters on their feet. And it became essential to have socks. And I couldn't imagine not having a pair of socks to wear with my shoes. But there was a time when we had shoes without having socks. And we had to live like that, and that's just the way it was. And you got blisters in your feet, and that's how it was. So what I'm wondering now is what else is going on in our lives that works a certain way, and we just assume that this is the way it is. But then some man will invent a technique for fixing this thing that we do in our lives, so it won't need to happen anymore that way, and we could make our lives easier. And then we will become dependent on this change, and we wouldn't be able to imagine not having without this thing. So I'm thinking, well, what else goes on in our lives now that is automatic and works a certain way, but that we might find some solution for, some fix that makes it unnecessary. and then we wouldn't be able to imagine living without this fix. So nothing occurs to me now about what we do in our lives is automatic, but that there might be a fix for. But it just hadn't occurred to me what that fix might be. So I'm thinking we get up, we have an alarm to get up at a certain time, and that's another thing I'm thinking about. There was a time when we didn't have alarm clocks or clocks at all. We wouldn't have any idea of what time it was. We just have to estimate what time it was. And I don't know how some man realized that we could improve on how we monitor time and how we understood time to make life a lot easier. But there was a time when we didn't have watches or clocks, and we had no idea about specific times. We would go by the position of the sun in the sky. We'd go by bird song, and we'd go by how light it was outside, and we would just have to estimate what time it was. But there was a time when we didn't have clocks and watches, and we had to just guess what time it was. And then some man invented the clock, and I'm wondering how we even got the idea that we could be specific about what time it was. How did that concept come into our heads? How did some man realize that we could be accurate about time when before we were just estimating and guessing time? And I'm thinking there must be something else than the way we live life now that we assume has to be that way, and it wouldn't occur to us to think we could improve on it in some way and make it unnecessary. So something that occurs to me now is going to the toilet, just urinating. So what happens now is you're walking around and then you get the feeling that you want to go to the toilet. So you stop whatever you're doing and you go to the toilet. And then do your wee and then flush the toilet and the job is done. But I'm thinking one day we might invent something that will make going to the toilet unnecessary. And then we will become dependent on this fix. And we wouldn't be able to imagine not having this fix in our lives. But there was a time when we didn't have this. So at the moment, when we feel the need to urinate, then we stop what we're doing and we go to the toilet. And do your wee, and then the job is done. But maybe there is a fix for that we will invent one day. Maybe there's some thing that you can attach to your penis or whatever, and it will make needing to go to the toilet unnecessary, and you could just wee as you stood there, and this device would take care of the urine somehow without making any mess and without having any problems or whatever. And then that's it. And then we will become dependent on it and we'll wonder how we could have lived without this device, which makes going for a wee unnecessary. And we could just do it where you stood there without making any mess and private and clean, whatever. So I'm wondering what else is going on in our life now that we will improve upon in some way, and we wouldn't be able to imagine living without the improvement, whatever that is. So I'm just thinking now about what we do in our lives that we assume has to be done that way and couldn't imagine living without this thing. So I'll I'll see what I come up with.